Hola, hola.
Hola. I think we are live.
You think or you know?
No, I really don't know a whole lot, but
Of course, now you're pausing.
um, yeah, so I'm trying to figure out why we did not go live on your Instagram. I'm going to work that out here, but we are live on TikTok. We are live on
TikTok.
Facebook, on my Instagram. I'm
TikTok, we are live on Facebook,
down
on my.
there.
So, yeah, so are you going to invite me or what? Am I going to be part of this thing with you?
Yes, I think we're going to.
You
I just sent you an
know
invite
the realtor answers.
on TikTok. Hopefully that you got that.
You're definitely active, but I haven't had the invitation to be a guest.
Well, let's try it again here. It says invitation sent. You are a guest. Boy, we're really rocking and rolling here. We're like super experts at multi-streaming across all these different platforms, aren't we?
Guest.
Let's see here. I'm gonna
I
go.
sent you a request.
What's that?
I just sent you a request. Did you get it? Please be my friend.
Let's see here.
It's on TikTok. Bear with us if you're already connected. We're having a minute of.
I think we're getting you on here.
Okay, good.
I think we need to see your face though. There we go.
All right, we're here.
I think we're rocking and rolling on all platforms except we are still waiting for your Instagram to connect. Actually, we're waiting for my Instagram to connect too. And I got to turn down my sound here.
Yeah, you're definitely echoing.
I'm doing exactly what I told you not to do and have both speakers on. I just don't listen to my own advice.
Amateur.
Yes, I'm an amateur. All right, so what are we here for? We're here for real estate Q&A, fun stuff. While I'm trying to do the technically difficult stuff and make us go on Instagram at the same time, we can actually start chatting. So if you guys are joining us, thanks for joining us. Leah, Tacos for the Win. Well, I need to know who Tacos for the Win is because that is clearly got to be my friend. It's a dude thing. Dulcie, yeah, let us know what questions you have about real estate because we are here to answer all the questions about all the things related to real estate that you wanted to ask but maybe didn't ask, were afraid to ask. I don't know why you'd be afraid to ask, but you know, all the weird stuff that people do. But we had some things that we get questions about a lot, and so we wanted to make sure that we took care of some of those common questions. I'll move my camera around here. Take care of some of those common questions that people have. If you guys have questions, definitely let us know what those are. Any questions related to real estate. And Jackie, I know we kind of talked a little bit about down payment last time because that's one of the things that we hear about most often. But let us know what things related to credit do you hear about a lot? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what it takes to be able to qualify for a mortgage, to buy a house. What are some of the common things that you hear your clients talk about as far as credit's concerned?
I think we briefly got into this topic last time. It seems to be that credit is always a golden number of 640. People are always under the impression that their credit has to be at 640 or higher. Some even mention 700 in order for them to qualify. So, Brian, why don't you bust that myth for us and let us know what you need to qualify, what the minimum credit score, or if there's a minimum credit score to qualify at all?
Yeah, this is a topic that is very confusing for people. And the reason it's so confusing is because there's rules that are set up by the agencies that end up buying the loans. And then there's rules that the lenders that are making the loans set up. And so it depends on who you're actually talking to. So for example, FHA is a common loan that is used by a lot of people for first-time home purchase. A lot of people say, well, I want a first-time home buyer program. Well, this is the program that most people are thinking about is FHA. And FHA, surprisingly, has a credit score minimum of 580 if you put the minimum 3.5% down payment down. Now, a lot of banks and a lot of lenders will say that they have a 600 or a 620, sometimes a 640 like you talked about, but that's not the case. FHA allows you to go down to 580, but depending on the bank or the credit union or the lender that you might be talking about, they can have higher limits and more restrictive rules. So that's where you got to be careful is if you're talking to a bank, they're probably going to tell you 640, like you said. If you're talking about a lower credit score than 580, some people don't really realize that you can actually go down to a lower credit score than that, down to 500. And at 500, you just have to put a down payment of 10% down. So you can actually get into an FHA loan with very, very little down, 10% down with a 500 credit score. There's a whole other set of loans, like conventional loans. They actually have a minimum of 620. And then VA loans is another one that most people don't realize. VA loan actually doesn't have any minimum credit score. So if you guys happen to be a service member, either active duty or a veteran, you actually don't have any minimum credit score requirements. A lot of lenders will tell you have a 600 or a 620 or a 640, but there actually is no minimum credit score requirement for veterans on a VA loan. So those are some of the misconceptions that a lot of people have about credit scores, is that you got to have a super high credit score. Jackie, have you ever had any clients that maybe went to a credit union and they couldn't even do an FHA loan?
Yeah, I actually I run into this situation a lot. I noticed that some of the clients and people that I've interacted with seem to think that because their credit history with the bank, as far as how long they've had their accounts, how long they made payments on their cars, etc., that they're going to get approved or that they're going to get a better product from the bank or from their credit union. And the reality is that they more often than not have much more restrictions on the qualifying part, and they're not even able to get a loan with a credit score under 690. So at this point it's not even 640, it's now 690, to where if you're going to a broker like Brian, you are able to qualify even for an FHA product like he mentioned at 580. And he was mentioning as well that we're not just getting this information of 640 by lenders, but we're also getting it from a lot of realtors. Being a realtor myself, I noticed that a lot of my peers constantly publish the whole minimum requirements, 640, 2 years of tax history or 2 years of employment history. And I hate to say it, but it's just spreading a lot of misinformation because it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one situation or one requirement for every single loan. Every situation is unique. So when you come to me, I'm always going to direct you to the expert. Yes, I can answer some basic questions. And yes, I have some knowledge based off of loan products, but I'm always going to refer you to the expert. So I make sure I don't disqualify you when you may actually qualify. I'm seeing somebody's Jules Cruz. Hello. Hi. Are you seeing those comments as well?
Yep, I'm seeing that. So, people a lot of times also ask the how much house can I afford? Like, how would you answer that for somebody?
Well, again, that's going to be depending not just on the income that you have, but on your expenses as well. Something that I like to tell my clients is that maybe if you know somebody that makes $100,000 a year, but doesn't qualify for a home, it doesn't mean that because you make $100,000 a year, you may not qualify for a home either. It just varies depending on what debts you have. I mentioned that the bank usually takes your debt to income ratio as well as your credit to be able to determine how much you can qualify for. So the payment is really going to depend on what the bank determines that you can afford for a home. So it's not going to be okay, I make this much, how much do I qualify for? I get that question a lot, actually. People tell me, okay, Jackie, I have a full-time job. My husband has a full-time job. We make 100,000 of combined income. How much can we qualify for? And the answer is just much more in depth than that, because it's not just, again, how much your income is, it's how much your debts are, what your debt to income ratio is, and how much payment can you afford based on those factors.
So debt to income ratio, what is that?
You tell me, you're the expert. You want me to put on my lender hat on?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one. But so what do you hear that people, like your average buyer, thinks that debt to income ratio is? Maybe let's start there. You tell me what people think it is, and then I'll tell you what it actually is.
I think from what I've heard is people are under the impression that debt to income ratio is all of the debts that they have. So any payment, water, electricity, rent, every single payment that they had, that not just what's on their credit, but every single payment that they have, that's already counted towards their debt to income ratio. That's one thing I hear a ton. And also I hear people thinking that it's just their net proceeds. So what they take home, that's going to be counted against the debt to income ratio. So why don't you actually clarify that with us? I know there's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, so that's actually really, really interesting that you brought those two things up, that people think it's their net take-home pay. I do hear people tell me that, like when I ask them how much you make, they say, well, I take home whatever. So obviously that's probably one of the things that they think is that just based on what the take-home pay is. The other thing that you brought up is like thinking that utilities and all that stuff are in there. That's actually pretty interesting too. What I actually hear from people that they think is that it's the total amount of debts that they have, like doing some kind of a math problem, like I owe, $2,000 on this credit card, I owe $10,000 on my car, whatever, and they compare that to their income. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I probably hear the most common. But what the debt to income ratio actually is it's pretty straightforward. It's basically the debt payments that you have for the most part of what's on your credit report. So for example, if you have a car loan, if you have student loans, if you have credit cards, those show up on your credit report. That would be included. And then we add in whatever the new mortgage payment is that we're trying to do for you. So we add that into it. We don't factor in other things that are not showing up on your credit report. So your utilities, your cell phone bill, insurance, none of that stuff is included in there. And so we take all that, we add it together, and then what we do is we divide that by your gross income. Hey, Amanda, thanks for joining us. So that's really what the debt to income ratio is. We just divide all of your expenses by your gross income being before you take all the deductions for taxes, for 401k, things like that. So we just divide that all into your gross income and figure out what that ratio is. Most loan programs will allow you to go to about 50%. It's kind of a rule of thumb I would tell people is, if your total expenses are half of your gross income, you're probably going to be okay. Now, that's not an across the board number. If you're talking about jumbo loans or USDA loans, those numbers are lower. You're generally going to be around 43%, maybe 45%. And then on FHA loans without down payment assistance, you could actually go potentially as high as 57%. So if you're just trying to get a rough idea of what the numbers are, if you figure about half of your gross income you could spend on your debts and your new mortgage payment. And one thing I wanted to bring up too, while we got some people on here, is if you are interested in getting some information from us, just comment or shoot us direct messages on any of the platforms you might be joining us on. And what we'll do is we'll send you a coupon for an appraisal credit. If you close a loan with us, other than a down payment assistance loan, you'll get an appraisal credit up to $650 and a home warranty up to $700. So if you guys have an interest in learning some more, even if you're not ready right now, just go ahead and comment or shoot us a direct message, and we'll get in touch with you and get you a coupon for those discounts. So having said that, another common thing that I think people wonder about is how long does it take to go through this and buy a house? So let me have you answer that, Jackie. Like, from the time somebody comes and talks to you, how long is a normal time take for them to be getting their keys and moving into their house?
I normally tell people 30 to 60 days. It really just depends on you. As far as, once you get qualified, if I have a pre-qual today, if you talk to Brian gets you pre-qualified and we're all shopping tomorrow, I can get you under contract, and in a month I can have the keys delivered to you. So it really just depends on your timeline. So it can be in as little as 30 days. However, I don't normally recommend people to wait until maybe a month before they have to renew their lease, or a month before they actually want to move out. I normally recommend people to look into the process, get some guidance. I would say 60, 90 days before, the sooner the better. The process can take, the process itself, the financing portion of it, once you're under contract, it's about 30 days. But it's really just how long it's going to take us to find the home, right? So that's going to be based on your timeline, how flexible you are with your options. There's a ton of options right now. There's more than 27,000 listings, so I'm sure there's going to be a great option. If you started the process today, you could potentially have the keys in your hand in a month. However, if your lease is maybe not due until, or not going to end until August, you can still start the process right now. We can even align the closing date for you to not have to pay here and not have to pay there, and have the payments start when your lease ends. So for example, I have a client that's interested in getting started. Their leases doesn't end until August, right? So they're thinking, maybe I have to wait until July, maybe I have to wait until June to initiate the process. And the answer is no. You actually can start right now. Even if we were to close May 1st, you won't have a payment until August. So that allows you to start the process right now and then get everything moving. And you're still paying at just one place, not paying your mortgage payment and also the rent payment. So that's going to allow you to have flexibility on the timeline, and also getting all your stuff out without having to rush out the weekend before your lease expires. So there's definitely a ton of options. The key here is to talk to us first, to schedule an appointment so we can see where you're at and what we need to do to get you ready. And if you are ready right now, financially ready, we can also put a plan in place so the dates align in a way where you can have your house just in time before your lease expires. So that's definitely an option right there. But to answer the question, once they're under contract, process is 30 days or less.
So what happens if somebody's in a lease? Let's say their lease is up, I don't know, October, and we're in April. Is there anything that can be done for people to get out of a lease early?
Yes, in most cases, you have to pay, I believe, it's usually like your 1 month's rent and the deposit, or 2 months rent, which is, like equivalent to what your 1 month in deposit would be. In those cases, I always try to encourage people to look at the bigger picture and see, what's going to benefit the most. I normally commit to being able to negotiate all of their closing costs, and if that offsets potentially what the lease payment is going to be, then obviously that would be a good option for them to do right now. So for example, I have these clients that They actually purchased a few months ago. They had their lease due. They didn't want to break their lease because of the amount of money that they had to pay. I believe it was $5,000. However, we got him into a really good down payment assistance program that at the time had a lower than market rate. I was able to negotiate 4% in concessions, and that allowed us to get them into their home for $215. So they paid $215 to move in. They got all their closing costs paid for, really just $215 out of pocket. So that $5,000 that they had to pay to some of their down payment, they were able to use it to break their lease, and it was still less than what the down payment would have been at that point. So I really would just say, talk to us, reach out. We can always put a plan in place. I know that sometimes it seems like, yeah, I don't want to spend $5,000. I don't want to spend $7,000, $6,000. But I promise you, we'll have a solution for you. If you allow yourself the opportunity to look into your options and see what those options are, I'm sure that we will have a good solution for you so you can save money and have a win-win situation all around.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, to get into a new house with $215, like that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And we're actually working with some clients right now where we're trying to, they haven't found a house yet, so the numbers aren't for sure, but like we're trying to structure it where we literally have, $100 as their net cost. We can't guarantee that every time, but it's possible when, we have down payment assistance programs that cover the down payment. Hey, Frank. And Frank, Frank's in real estate, but he has a lot of questions about real estate. He should probably chime in and ask us some questions, huh?
Frank, where's my morning call?
Yeah, I heard that the morning call has been slacking a little bit the last couple of days.
I haven't though.
But no, seriously, I mean, you can get in with a lot less. I mean, if you were trying to go get into an apartment, and the rent was $2,000 a month, like how much would people be spending out of pocket to get into that apartment?
You're going to spend about $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
I actually, last year I had a client that was going to go rent, didn't have the down payment, and she was asking me about rentals. She actually reached out to me through social media to ask me about rentals. And then I asked her, why are you going to rent? Like, what's the situation right now? What's preventing you from buying a home? And she said something that I hear a lot, which is, I don't have any money. I don't think we're there with our credit. I don't think we're ready yet. And then I digged in a little deeper. Like, why don't you think you're ready? And again, this is something that I hear a lot because my cousin, because my niece, because this person said that you have to have this, you have to have savings, you have to have a 700 credit score. And it really, like we said before, it's not the situation for all. So I was able to dig in and ask her, and they were going to pay if they purchased a house. I'm sorry, not purchased a house. If they rented a house, they were going to end up paying $6,000. Because some of the houses that they were looking at through my MLS subscription, they were $2,300. Then you had to pay a month and a half worth of deposit, then applications to apply for the house, and then a cleaning fee. So it was going to be close to $7,000 that they were going to have to pay out of pocket. And I got them into their home for $318. Yeah.
$318.
All of the problems, I don't have money. Well, I have a down payment assistance program. Well, I don't have the credit. Well, you really don't need the 700 credit score. And you're not ready. Why aren't you ready? Like, who told you you weren't ready? And this is, again, something that I see a lot. People will automatically discourage themselves, disqualify themselves because they think, based on what other people told them, that they don't qualify. When the reality is that you might qualify right now and you might be able to buy a house for that little money out of pocket, and you're just your biggest obstacle at this point. It's really not like what you qualify for, is just you getting in your way.
So if somebody is like in that debating mindset about whether they should buy or whether they should rent, obviously the difference in out of pocket that you mentioned can be pretty significant. But other than that, like what kind of things do you ask people about when trying to figure out should they rent or should they buy? Because it's not right for everybody to buy all the time, right?
No, I definitely don't think that everybody should buy. I do think that people should purchase a home when they're ready or financially ready, but by looking at all of their options first, right? So one of the things that Brian and I do, if you ever come to us to see what those options are, just remember, for starters, you're coming to us for options. You're coming to us to see, to get some guidance and see where you're at and see if this is possible now or sometime along the way. But one of the things that we do is well, Brian specifically will, run the application, see where you're at with your credit, with your finances, and then we start doing different scenarios for you. So you can see, for instance, one of the things that Brian does is the cost of waiting analysis. So, what is it going to cost you to wait 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is, versus buying right now? So, that really allows people to see the full picture, or that really allows people to see how much money they're saving if they purchase now. And that, that maybe they don't think they're ready, but they really are. So it really is just contemplating all of your options, seeing everything and finding out for yourself before you ask someone that's not even the expert in the matter. Don't ask me, ask Brian.
Well, no, it's funny because a lot of people, they get this just an idea and or a concept like, oh, it's a bad time, or, you shouldn't buy now, or, it's better to rent with the market, whatever, the logic is there. But so infrequently do people actually calculate numbers to figure out, well, what do the numbers actually say? And it's so rare that I find a situation where, even waiting 6 months to buy or waiting a year to buy, most of the time you end up saving money or making more money by buying even as short as 6 months. But that's if you're going to stay there. If you think that you might be moving or that there might be a reason to sell in a short window of time, that's where we kind of go, okay, well, let's look at the numbers the other way, because, for example, if we average a 5% appreciation rate, which is, close to where it normally is, and you've got 5% in costs, just like real estate agent expenses plus closing costs, you might be looking at 6, 7, 8% costs to sell a house, potentially even more than that. So if your appreciation is only 5% in a year, if you really are thinking that you might need to move in less than a year, it's really probably not a smart idea to buy. But much longer than that, like 2 years, you're probably better off actually in purchasing a home, even if you think that you might be needing to sell within 2 years, and definitely longer than that. It's a good idea to buy. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, because I bring it up with everybody that I talk to, is how easy it actually is to be able to acquire investment properties like multiple times and be able to get those investment properties in a really low down payment scenario. I know you're trying to get back on
Yeah.
TikTok. I just sent you another invite to try to bring you back on. Looks like you're coming back on board. But talk about that if you would. Like, there's an actual strategy with a name to it, where people can acquire rental properties over a short period of time, over a couple of years, without having to come up with huge down payments. Can you talk about that a little bit?
House hacking.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So it's, the term for it is house hacking. And this is where, in some instances, people will purchase homes, live in them for 2 years, then over time build equity, then go on to the next one, use the previous one as a rental. I see this a lot in multi-units, and we actually have a mutual client that has done it, but just with regular single family homes. It works both ways, whether it's a single family or a multi-unit. The nice thing about the multi-unit is obviously you're renting it out, and in that sense, let's say that it's 4 units, fourplets. You live in one, you rent out the other ones, and the rent for the other ones are essentially paying for your mortgage, right? So you're building equity over time, and then you're able to cash out on that equity to purchase a different home where you do this rinse repeat, do the same thing again, live in it as your primary, live in it for a couple of years, then move out, and that home stays as the rental, and you keep doing it until you build an empire.
Yeah, and it's actually, I mean, it can happen really quickly because when you get a house and you, let's say you buy a house to live in, whether it's multi-unit or just a single family home, you're signing loan documents saying that you intend to occupy the property for the next 12 months. After that 12 months is up, there's really nothing stopping you from going out and buying a new primary residence. Now, you're probably not going to get any money out. Like if you stay longer, you might be able to refinance and pull some cash out like you were talking about, but you probably
I'm sorry, Brian. This is so weird. I have a cop right next to my window, so give me a second.
All right. We're going to see if she stays out of trouble. So I'll kind of finish my thought here while Jackie's chatting with the police officer.
That's funny. I'm a realtor. I have an appointment here.
Thing that you can do with house hacking is after a 12-month period of time, you can go buy a new primary residence. The really good thing about that is instead of buying an investment property with 20-25% down payment, if you buy the next property as your primary residence,
I'm going to show the house.
You can do it for 5% down payment. And that 5% down payment is a lot easier to come up with when you're buying a primary residence for that small amount down. And then you don't have to worry about changing the existing loan that you had on the first property. You just move out of there, you put a renter in there, and then you're into it for the 5%. So Jackie, how did you stay out of jail? What did you do?
Somebody called because I've been here for an hour. I'm just outside of a house that I need to show. He was really nice about it, though. He said some people can't mind their own damn business.
You don't look like a criminal, huh? He was okay with you?
I'm just here doing a live. I'm doing Real Talk Tuesday with Brian, answering real estate questions. How is that suspicious? I'm going to invite the neighbors next time. They can tune in to our live so they see that we're not doing any suspicious activity.
Well, now when you show that property to your clients, you can let them know you've got neighborhood watch that's going to keep them safe.
Yeah.
That's funny. I've never had that happen. Well, I usually don't sit outside of a house for like an hour. They're probably thinking you're casing the joint or something like that.
It's Coolidge. What am I supposed to be doing here?
So, we talked about a little bit about, getting into being able to build your real estate empire and acquiring investment properties to be able to move to the next one and have a smaller down payment. But the other piece that a lot of people don't think about when, as far as the cost to acquire properties, is the closing costs. Gladys Kravitz lives, yes. So we talked about down payments before, but there's a whole other piece of money that you have to come up with. Like I call it a bucket of money. You got two buckets. One's the down payment, and then the other one is the closing costs. Roughly, like ballpark, what would you say for people to plan for in terms of what they have to come up with closing costs? And then if they don't have that, how do you work around it? Because you're pretty good at working around it.
I am. Well, I normally tell people to plan for 2 to 3% of the purchase price to have in closing costs, and that's in addition to their down payment. I find that people tend to get confused on the whole down payment and closing costs, like you were just mentioning. They think that the down payment is the closing cost, or the closing cost is a down payment. And I always tell them that it is in addition to, and that's where I come in as their agent. That as I've mentioned this to you in how we have our conversations with clients, all of the agents have access to the same homes, right? But that's where the difference is made on how we're going to be able to advocate for you as our client or as our buyer, and how we're going to be able to make the difference on the negotiation. A lot of the time, I mean, I want to say that at least 95% of my clients, if not more, honestly, get their closing costs covered because I negotiate all of that for them. And I have a standard number in mind all the time. I know in my mind that I have to negotiate 3%. And that's with clients that have their down payment, have the funds to cover it, and with clients that don't. A lot of times people seem to be under the impression that, oh, well, that's because they're on down payment assistance, they don't have the money to cover it, or that's because you're getting it because it's a low purchase price, and that is far from the truth. We actually had an investor. He was putting in 25% of his down payment, and he definitely had the funds to cover the down payment and the closing costs. And I was still able to get him the closing costs covered, or at least what the loan allowed for the closing costs to be. I have another one right now. I was able to get them $20,000 in closing costs. So it's really not the amount. It's really not the purchase price. It's the realtor that's going to make the difference, and that's going to advocate on your behalf to get you that covered. When I have my buyer consultations, I always tell my clients, this is your responsibility. It's not something that the seller has to pay for, but I will do everything in my power to get it for you. And like I said, I would want to say 10 times out of 10 because I know that I get closing costs on every single one of my deals, but I'm going to say 9 times out of 10 just to be modest. I know that I will get you the closing costs. I do tell them, like, plan on having the closing costs if I cannot get them for you. But more often they're surprised because they either have to come in with very little money, like we were just talking about, $200-$300, $1,000, or just their down payment, because I'm usually very successful at getting them the full amount.
Okay, I'm gonna play attorney here and say, none of these are promises, no guarantees.
Yes. I always tell my clients that I cannot guarantee you that. And at the end of the day, this is your responsibility as a buyer. You have to cover the closing costs. What I can guarantee you is that I'm not afraid to go to battle for my clients. I will fight for those closing costs, and I'm going to do everything in my power to get you those closing costs. Now, I would love to say I can guarantee you to get all of it, but I always tell them, I'm going to do my best to get you most or all. However, I can't guarantee.
Yeah, and people worry about, whether or not that's going to happen. They feel like if they don't have the money, like, should they even try this and all that? And I always tell them, like, here's the thing, like, it's not going to hurt to try, because, let's say you need 100% of the closing costs covered. If you can't negotiate and get it covered, then you don't have to buy the house. Like, you're not going to be in a situation where you're stuck coming up with money that you don't have. Mm-hmm. So whatever your situation is, just come talk to us, because we're going to figure it out. Like, I was talking to somebody this morning, or yesterday it was, and they really didn't have any money. Like, they said they haven't been able to save any money up. And they're like, well, do we have to be able to come up with money? And I said, listen, it's not going to hurt to go in this. They wanted to know, like, was I going to negotiate for them? And I said, no, I'm not going to negotiate for them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with their agent and basically tell the agent, here's what it looks like. They can qualify for X purchase price. We got to keep their payments under a certain dollar amount. And then with that, what we have to do is we have to negotiate and get X amount of dollars covered in the closing costs, because we don't have any money to work with. We got no flexibility there. So every offer that the agent makes is going to be contingent upon getting the closing costs covered. Sometimes the seller will come back and say, no, we're not going to give you that much. And then the agent's going to say, well, we have to get it. A really good, strong agent like you is going to almost insist. And you can't force them to do it, but if they want to sell the house to you, then they have to. And there's some little strategies and, tricks you can do, not tricks, but just some ways that you can convince them to, like, they might be saying, oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and offer $400,000 for this house, and I'm going to ask for $10,000 in closing costs. And the seller doesn't want to part with that much money. Well, sometimes what you might do is say, okay, well, we're going to go to $405,000, but we still need that $10,000 back. Now it's only costing the seller about $5,000 out of that, but it's still getting the $10,000 that we need to cover the closing costs out of their bucket of money that is needed to be able to complete the transaction. So the main thing is never be afraid just because you don't have a bunch of money saved up. Like, come to us. We're going to figure out how it's going to happen. And right now, there's a lot more flexibility. Like, sellers are willing to make accommodations for buyers, right?
There's definitely a ton of options right now as far as homes. There's a ton of inventory, which means sellers are a little bit more motivated and more flexible to make things work. I can tell you on every single one of the deals that I do go in very aggressively, and 5 times out of 5, I get a counter offer. I almost never get my initial offer accepted, but that's because the agent has to also try on their end to try to make the best deal work for their seller, right? And a lot of agents, from what I've noticed, will stop at that. Oh my God, I got a counter. They don't want to do it. I'm not going to keep trying. Not me. I mean, Brian has seen some of my escrows. I've had 5, 6 addendums, 7 addendums, counter offers. I can counter all day. I'm not afraid to ask. I will do whatever I need to do to make the deal work. And that is something that I always like to tell my buyers, my clients, like, just know that whatever there is to be done, I'm going to do.
So one other thing that I think people maybe get a little bit confused by, and I'm not sure if agents are really confused by it or pay much attention to it, and that's the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. Do you think that agents really know the difference? Because I know that buyers probably don't.
I know you don't want me to answer that question.
No, I do, because I don't want to answer it.
Well, I think that most of us, my peers and I, don't know that, the difference of a pre-qual and a pre-approval. See, I'm going to include myself in that, so it doesn't sound as bad.
Well, I guess here's what I would say is there's confusion about it in the industry, and people use the terminology very interchangeably. Like, we're in Arizona, and one of the things about Arizona is that you guys as realtors, your association came up with a form that you make us fill out that says, okay, yeah, these people are pre-qualified, and here's what they're pre-qualified for. Here's the documents that we've looked at. It's very different. Most states don't have that. Most states have a letter that we would generate that says they've been pre-qualified. Most states, they actually say pre-approved. And then here's some of the terms of the pre-approval. And they do usually list the types of documents that have been reviewed. So you're getting the same information roughly, but that letter that goes out, that's usually called a pre-approval letter. The form in Arizona is called a pre-qualification form. And as an agent, you wouldn't know if they've been pre-approved or pre-qualified by looking at that form unless the lender took the time to write in on a line item there stating that they've actually been pre-approved, either underwritten by an underwriter or got an automated approval through one of the automated systems, because the form that was developed doesn't really clarify it and it calls it a pre-qualification. So it's not totally on you guys to not be clear on it, because honestly, I think Arizona did a bad job in making that form and calling it what they did. So let me clarify for anybody that's listening. The pre-qualification can really be as simple as, we had a phone conversation and you told me what your credit looked like, and we could say you're pre-qualified. Now on that form, we do have to mark if we've pulled a credit report, but I could say no, that I didn't pull a credit report, and still give out that form and say that you're pre-qualified. So it could be all verbal information. and that pre-qualification could go out. Now, we don't do that, and I would tell you most lenders don't do that, because nobody wants to have somebody running around that doesn't really know for sure if they're qualified. The pre-approval, on the other hand, is where we've actually gotten an application, we've actually pulled credit, we've got all the documents that we should be looking at to determine if somebody is approved, and that's when we run it through the automated underwriting system. Most loans use that, not all loans use that, not all loans require that. So that automated underwriting approval isn't the be-all, end-all determination of whether somebody's pre-approved. The pre-approval really means, hopefully, that we did run it, but that we've reviewed all the relevant documents like W-2s, paycheck stubs, tax returns, bank statements, that kind of stuff, to determine if somebody's qualified. So that's where a lot of confusion comes in, is the name of the form that we use in Arizona, but also just the form itself doesn't really allow us, or doesn't require us to tell you what lengths we've gone to. But a good agent, if they get an offer, like, what do you do when you get an offer? What's your first step that you do?
I normally call the lender to see what their buyer's profile is, where they're at, and I want to find out if they've been pre-approved, if this is a pre-qualification that was issued, what their finances look like, what their situation is, mainly if they're solid, or if there's one little thing they need to do in order to to get that loan declined. Because sometimes people are approved and they're barely approved, like they barely made it into that threshold to be able to get the approval. So I definitely want to know what the situation is. Then you have lenders like Brian that will tell you before you even ask. In our situation, when we putting an offer on behalf of a mutual buyer, Brian will take it upon himself to send a video out to the listing agent. So that gives you a little bit more, a higher chance of getting that offer approved, especially if you're competing against other buyers, because then that agent is able to see that the buyer is solid, that we're professional, that we're in good communication with them, and that's going to ultimately give the buyer a better chance of getting that offer accepted.
Yeah, but the problem is, once they see a video of me, they're going to know that the professionalism is just very questionable. No, but you know what's crazy? Like, you will call and you'll ask those questions. When I don't get the opportunity to do that video, like, there might be an agent I haven't worked with before, and so they'll send out an offer and they don't let me know that they're doing that. It is so rare that I get a call from the listing agent. Like, I would say less than a third of the time do I get a phone call from the listing agent asking me any questions about the buyers and the buyer's financing. And I haven't sent a video, I haven't made a phone call because I didn't know the offer went out, and then I don't get any correspondence from the listing agent. You look surprised.
Well, I'm just gonna say that as agents, we need to do our due diligence on both sides, whether we're representing the client, the buyer, or we're representing the seller. If I'm representing the seller, I want to talk to the lender. I want to know what the situation is, and I want to make sure that we're going to be able to take that loan all the way to the finish line. If I'm representing the buyer, then I want that other agent to know that when I bring in an offer, I bring it all the way to the finish line, and that's because I have a good lender and I have everything that we need to have in place to get that loan out to go through. So when you say that, I mean, it doesn't fully surprise me. I know that there's a lot of that going on in the industry, but we just need to do better as agents. Honestly, it's just we're doing a disservice to our clients, but not communicating. Communication is a most basic part of a service, is a most basic part of a business. Like, that's the most basic thing that we can do. Like, communication should be the easiest of everything that it's involved in a real estate transaction. And communication goes a long way. For me, If I was a listing agent and I'm getting communication from the buyer's agent, I'm getting communication from the lender, then I feel pretty good about that file or that offer to go to present to my clients. And I make sure to let them know that what we're working with. And sometimes there's been times where an offer looks maybe slightly better than what I think is going to work out, or maybe the other offers are a little bit better, but I haven't heard from the agent. I haven't had any communication from the lender, and I express that to my clients, and ultimately they make the decision with all the facts, with all of the information to be able to determine who's going to bring that client all the way to the finish line. Because ultimately, that's what we want. We don't want to have a denial in the middle of the process. Um, we don't want to cancel and go back on market. I think that's super important, and I do see that a lot. I know because I submitted offers, and sometimes I called in to let agents know I submitted an offer, or I've called in to let the lender know that I got an offer, and they don't even know who the client is or what I'm talking about because they have not been made aware at all that there's an offer being sent or that the buyer's out looking, which honestly just blows my mind because where this is a very important transaction is a lot of money in play, and it's just like why are you not in communication, why are you not working together to bring this to the finish line? And the sad thing is that that's the same experience that the client receives. So if they're not talking to each other, now just imagine the experience that the client is getting. That's why a lot of buyers are left in the dark of the whole process. Like at the end, they just sign and they don't even know like the terms. They don't even know what kind of deal they got into. Um, and obviously, then that there's no referrals coming. uh, I wouldn't refer somebody like that. And as somebody that's primarily referral based, I pride myself in communication. That is, like I said, the most basic thing of service you can offer. And if you can't even do that part right, I would be concerned as a consumer of, who I'm working with. That's why, as cliche as it sounds, who you work with does matter, not just because of the advocating part, but communication is so important, professionalism, and everything we're going to be able to do working together for you, the consumer.
So how do people know who's going to be a good agent? Because I mean, you kind of like took a bullet for the industry a little bit ago, and I'll just tell you, I've been reviewing some files from other people, and I won't name names or anything, but I see that they're in a status where they've been pre-approved, and I go through and look at the file, look at all the information, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, there's missing information here. There's no explanation. We don't have enough money documented for closing. Like, it makes me wonder, like, how are we sending people out there doing this without being thorough up front? And I know sometimes there's a pressure. Maybe it's from the clients, maybe it's from the real estate agent. Somebody says, I want to go buy a house. So everyone's like, okay, let's go get them out and show them pretty houses, get them all excited, and then we'll figure it out later. But like, that's a terrible way to go about doing it. For me, what I understand is that when you are out looking for a house, it's exciting. When you get under contract on a house, now you start writing checks. And now you got a deadline, and now you got to pack up your house and move. It starts to get stressful. Buying a house is one of the most stressful things that we do. If we're throwing a bunch of extra paperwork into the mix, like there's already going to be paperwork still, that's normal. But when we start getting stuff that we haven't looked at before, and we start having surprises, and then we start asking for all sorts of explanations that we never asked for before, like it just adds to the stress level, and it makes the experience really suck. I mean, like, you don't want to have your experience buying a house feel like torture. Like, it should be able to be exciting and fun. And too often for people, it turns into something, really stressful. How do people know, like, what questions, how do they choose their realtor? How do they choose their lender? Like, what are some smart questions to ask for the consumer to make sure they're picking the right people to represent them?
I am a big believer in numbers. Numbers don't lie. And if I was a consumer, if I was a buyer looking for somebody to represent me in a transaction this important, I would ask, like, how many homes have you closed in the last year? Have you worked in this area? Are you familiar with what can you tell me about the market? We do have a lot of licensed agents that are licensed but don't actively do business. And it's very important to do business in this market to be able to handle it. I can tell you from first experience, the market a year and a half ago is not the same as the market now. The market last year is not the same as the market now, even in different cities. The market in the outer skirts is going to be different from buying in downtown Gilbert. It's going to be different from buying in Mesa. So it really just depends on the knowledge that the agent has, the production that the agent has. And, another thing that doesn't lie is reviews. If you go to any of my social media platforms, I have a lot of testimonials from real clients, real testimonies saying what their experience has been working with me, solo or with the team. Um, well, w- that kind of threw me off.
I think it's your team.
I have a team. I have a team of agents. Another thing is we try to make ourselves available when it's convenient for you, whether it's myself or one of my agents. We are there for you. We try to make it convenient for you. And I was just going back to the whole I have testimonies, I have testimonials, I have reviews, I have real client experiences. And as somebody that's based primarily off referrals, if you heard from me from like if you saw me, if you're coming to me, is more than likely is because somebody referred you to me. Or you saw me on social media and you saw testimony from one of my clients, you Googled me, the information is there, the stats are there, numbers don't lie. And I can assure you the experience that other people have with me is going to be the same or even better when you work with me. So again, to answer your question, Brian, I would definitely ask those questions because experience does matter, numbers don't matter, and being the expert in the area matters as well. And
We
I
are up against our end of our time here, so I want to just bring this up on here. If you guys have an interest in having us help you, Jackie, I know she's got to jump off here. Feel free to send either of us a DM. We will send you this coupon for up to $650 for an appraisal credit if you close with us on anything but a down payment assistance loan, and up to $700 for a home warranty from Jackie. So appreciate all you guys jumping on and joining us. We're going to be back in 2 weeks for Real Talk Tuesday. If you have questions you want answered, make sure you ask them to us. Feel free to send us messages anytime, and we'll definitely respond to you. And thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Jackie, thank you.
Adios. Thank you.
Adios.